Hi everybody. This class I've been thinking about doing this video for a while. This kind of illustrates the power of compounding. So this illustrates the power of compounding, and most of you, even if you're not finance majors, kind of understand the power of compounding. There's no question about that. I know that that's a popular topic, but more to the point, illustrating it, seeing the numbers actually brings the point home. So I've come up with a fictitious hypothetical, which hopefully brings the point home. So let's assume a 10-year-old child inherits money from a grandparent. Wake up one day, 50 years ago. So that would be what, about 1974, right? 2024? This is a while ago, right? 1974. In 1974, they inherit 100,000, which, by the way, if you run an inflation calculator, which you could do on your own now, and that's good practice, which tells you what $1 in 1974 is worth today. And that's important because whenever you hear these stories like, oh, I bought my house in the 60s and it's worth this today, it's kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to express it that way, because $1 today buys a lot less than what $1 was bought in 1960. So you have, like, for instance, Babe Ruth, right? Arguably the greatest baseball player of all time. He was making, say, all in, I saw an article once, and I don't know if this is how accurate it is, but it was not that inaccurate, like say 500,000 or 600,000, but it was in 1927. So today that number, if you run it through an inflation calculator, is in the $10, $11 million range. So even though athletes are even making more than that, that's still a big number for anybody. And there was no taxes back then. The tax, I don't even think we had much of a tax effect. So he was probably on a tax-to-tax basis making probably 18, 19 million. So, and he probably didn't need like a high-powered agent. This is 1927. So the point is, so you didn't have to pay an agent, or whatever you paid him was like a business associate. So we got to compare apples to apples, but let's not get too far from the point. So this person inherits 100,000, and if you do the math, it's probably about 600,000 in today's dollars, which is a lot of money. But the reason why I used the 10-year-old scenario is because most people who inherited that money might spend it, might open a business, might do different things, and that's all, or might just spend it. We know how often people come into windfalls and just squander the money. That happens too. But in this particular case, the child has a guardian, and the guardian's a good, honest, hardworking, bright person, and says, we're going to put this money away in a trust, and you'll have access to the money when you're 60. So this way your old age is settled. And unless there's an extraordinary circumstance, this money will grow until you're 60. So that's your scenario. 10-year-old person inherits 100,000, 1974, 50 years. Now, what do I invest it in? What does the trustee invest it in? Well, if we just invested in government securities, which is the safest investment out there. Now, where do I get these numbers? These are the actual returns. These are the actual returns over the last 50 years. So I didn't just make these numbers up. So government securities will return $710,000. So that's what you'd have in 60 years. Now, if you go by the purchasing power, which was this money was worth 600,000, you've got a small return on investment, but very safe with no volatility. Now, if they had invested in U.S. stocks, which obviously had the crash of '87, the recession of '09, the '70s saw some challenges, you would have had a lot of volatility. And that's the reason why people don't necessarily invest in these things, because they say, why? What if I need the money during a period where the market's down? And that's all valid. And how many people are going to want to lock money away for 50 years? I mean, if you're a 30-year-old person, you come into 100,000, are you going to want to be locking money away for the next 50 years? You'll be 80 when you see it. So there's a lot of extenuating circumstances why people just don't do that. But in this case, it gives you an example of the power of money. Now, the markets have returned 12%, with admittedly a lot of volatility, right? A lot of volatility. So whereas the bond market might have looked like this, and remember, the business cycle is always upward trending because of inflation, right? And this is rates, and this is time. Right, the horizontal axis is time, a little sloppy on my part. The y-axis or the vertical axis is rates. The stock market So this is the general. I'm sorry. This is the general business cycle, ups and downs. And government bonds would look like this. So you could sleep pretty sound every night. But stocks are going to look like this. And that's the fear, right? You have all this volatility. So having said that, right? Having said that, that's why people invest in stocks. I mean, in bonds versus stocks. But notice the S&P has returned 12% with all that volatility. You would have had 28 million when that person reached 60. And also notice that this number continues to grow. Bear with me. This number continues to grow at each level. So even if you didn't earn 12%, look at the progression because of and how profound, how geometric in mathematical terms the growth rates are at different levels. If I was to graph that, well, it's a little upside down, unfortunately. I don't like the way that looks. I should have started with. Let me see something. Let me copy that and paste it here and see if this works. Nope. Alright, well, anyway, we're going to have to do this upside down, I guess. Let me just try one more thing. And I don't want to belabor the point here. No. Okay, I guess we could try this. Let's just leave it alone. But if I was to graph it, and it's a little upside down this chart, so forgive me. But you could see, not my best graph, but I'm going to highlight that and go to recommended charts. The growth, even though it kind of looks weird when I look at it this way, look how profound that growth is at different levels. So that's the power of compounding, and that's a good illustration of what money, when you play it safe. Now, many people, it would pay maybe not to get 4, but what we mostly see is people who step into equities just a bit and live with some of that risk. Don't put away as much money, but come out somewhere here. So you can save a significant amount if you're disciplined and have that money for your retirement. But again, anybody, you would think about someone inheriting $600,000 in 1974, a lot of money. I mean, you could buy a house for, back then, for probably 20 or 30 grand. So it would take a lot to have that kind of discipline, but that gives you the idea. It's like kind of what Warren Buffett said. So hopefully that helps illustrate a point about compounding, and hope you found this video useful.